Welcome, welcome to the Senate Education Committee. That clock is 5 minutes late, so it's 9 o'clock according to my cell phone, so we'll get started. Would you please rise, and I'll have Senator Fenton recite the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we're going to get started with the first bill today, which is SB 77. And I don't see the person who I thought was going to introduce it. Senator Lang, would you be so good to introduce 77?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I give you Senate Bill 77. Thank you.
I'd like to read what's all about. So 77 has to do with relative to changes in school placements of students. The bill requires State Board of Education rules on manifest educational hardship to allow for a school board's assignment of a pupil to an approved private school. I don't have anyone who wants to speak to it. I have 3 people in the audience who are opposed to it, and 23 people online that are opposed to it. Thank you. We just introduced the first bill, but you can hang around for the second.
Sorry.
Senator Ward, do we have anybody that can answer any questions about this?
Well, I'm sort of hoping that maybe Attorney Fenton can answer. Can you answer any questions on 77, which has to do with the relative to changes in school placement for students? Okay, that would be great.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you, and I'm sorry I was a couple of minutes late. Senator Avard has prime bills in 3 different committees this morning, so he appreciates your courtesy.
State your name.
As you know, a few years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court found.
State your
Oh,
name.
I'm sorry. Grant Bossy, Deputy Chief of Staff for the New Hampshire Senate. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court found that programs that are open to private schools may not exclude otherwise qualified religious private schools. And in 2021, the legislature went through our statutes and fixed them and got them in line with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in those cases. We missed one, and that was manifest educational hardship in section 193.3. This is not a policy change, as approved private schools are included several times in that chapter. However, down in 193.3 E, they are left out. So this bill would align the entire chapter with the intent of the existing law and with U.S. Supreme Court precedent, in saying that in the case of a manifest educational hardship, which the parent would petition, which the school board would approve, which the district would approve as a placement, that again, qualified private schools would be included throughout the chapter as they are in the beginning of the chapter.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Mr. Bossy, for taking my questions. I think I've got 2. So one is for manifest educational hardships. Do we know how many of these we have as cases a year?
I do not.
Okay, so we'll need to follow up on that. And the second is, I mean, as it stands right now, and I understand this is about rule writing. I'm just trying to, if we're going to move to approve private schools, it's been public schools in the past. So what are there's no fiscal note with this, and I know that it is, again, changing. It's allowing for these rules to be written, but there's got to be a cost if this educational manifest educational hardship was just public before, and now we're saying public and private. Where is that? Where's the fiscal note associated with this? Or is that in the leading legislation that brought to, the ask for writing these rules?
Thank you, Senator. This is not adding private schools as placements under manifest educational hardship. That is already included in the chapter. In section 193.3, I can show you, private schools are already included in
Right.
several places. This aligns the reference down in the meat of the statute under subparagraph E to also include that.
So there's already so this is already approved. These are the rules that are being written that would facilitate this process.
This would align the entire chapter with the intent, with the current
All right.
statute.
I'm looking right.
Yes.
Okay.
It would not be anticipated that this would add any extra placements anywhere that school boards aren't already approving. I'll leave that for you.
Yeah. I don't have my computer today because of an internet issue, and that's exactly why I want it, because I want to look at the original.
So as you can see, 193.3 already anticipates the option of qualified private schools for manifest educational hardship placements. This would not change that. This would, again, on the second page, subparagraph E, add in that phrase qualified private school so that it's consistent throughout.
Understood. So I'm just looking for the legislation that rolled this into place and where the fiscal note was associated with it.
I'm not sure. I believe that was 2021, but
Yep,
we
it's
can.
right there, 2021, so I'll find it and get my answer. Thank you.
Excellent.
Beautiful.
Any other questions from the committee members? Senator Lang.
Thank you for taking my question. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I understand, if I'm reading this right, what this is about is manifest hardship, sometimes bullying, right? So an incident in the school where the student can no longer stay in school, at least if I remember my school board days and my 6 years, I think we only had 2 of these cases. And in that case, the school would be paying the tuitional costs wherever they go. And so there's a net zero to a certain extent on this. If I have to move a student from Winnisquam School District to Laconia District School because of a manifest hardship, a problem that happened in a school, we would have to tuition and pay for that anyway, wouldn't we?
Yes,
The district, so this doesn't change any of that.
Yeah, manifest educational hardship is the longstanding policy. It is relatively rare. And the old statute before the Supreme Court decisions, I believe, allowed you could go to another school in the district, you could go to a neighboring district, you could go to a secular private school. And this, aligning with Supreme Court decision, said any private school in New Hampshire, if you're going to include private schools, you have to include them all, including the religious ones. And then in going through the statute, we missed a reference where
Thank you.
private schools should have been included. Yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody in the audience wants to?
No, I don't want to.
Would anyone have any questions for Attorney Fenton?
No.
No? Thank you very much for offering. Okay, great. So that concludes the hearing on SB 77. The next bill we have is, let's see, 5. What is the time? I'll have to wait 7 minutes for the next one. Just in case somebody just came in just for that one.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Quick reminder from the third floor that we are doing an addendum calendar to scoop a bill out of finance. So if education in its wisdom decides to exec any bills today, we could put them on an addendum calendar and put them on the floor Thursday. Again, you don't have to. It's an option. We just want to make sure you knew about it.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that we go into executive session on Senate Bill 77.
Executive session on SB 77.
Madam Chair, I move OTP on Senate Bill 77. If I could speak to my motion, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, I think this bill is a housekeeping bill to clean up the statute, to make everything into alignment, beginning at the beginning of the chapter. Going back, like I said, as my school board days, this was actually practice anyway. When a student had a manifest hardship, we tried to find the closest school that would be least impactful to the student. Sometimes that was a private school, sometimes a private religious school, sometimes that was a public academy, and sometimes it was another public school in another district. So this is not an uncommon activity for, I won't say it's not uncommon. When the situation comes up, it's not an uncommon. It doesn't happen in like I said, in 6 years on the school board, it happened twice where we had to do an out-of-district placement for a student. In that case, I think actually one of them we did an out-of-district and the other one we did an in-district private school placement. So I would recommend OTP for all these.
Thank you very much, Senator Ward, and Senator Lang. And I appreciate that you could kind of backfill some of this for me. But you would, so if you were, it sounds like it's limited when you, or was limited when you had to do this, but if you chose to send them to a private school versus a public school, you still have to cover the cost of the tuition. So we're putting money either into the public education system or into the private system. Was there a difference in the cost that you noted?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So again, regardless of what the tuition is, so I'll give an example. Laconia School District is more expensive than Winnisquam Regional School District. We would have to pay that differential as well. So it didn't matter what school district they were placed into. The cost was borne by the sending school district. And that's the true with any private school. So again, I use it in my district. We have Tilton Prep, and it's a high school. And occasionally, one of the kids went to Tilton Prep, and we pay the differential as a school district. We had the student, in that case, it was a rape, couldn't stay in the school system, and so we moved them out of the high school into a closest school system that was close to us, to where they didn't have that problem.
I have a motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 77. Any further discussion? Senator Prentice?
And I want to thank, I don't want to belabor this, and I appreciate Senator Lang being able to put this in context at the local school board level. I just want the opportunity to go back and visit the original statute. I'm hesitant. Anytime we start talking about public versus private, I just want to make sure I'm on the right line here. So Senator Lang has been very helpful, but is there any way that we could, I mean, at this point, I wouldn't vote in favor of it without having the opportunity to dig just a little bit deeper.
Okay.
I thought there'd be somebody here that could, and again, Senator Lang has been great, but someone from the department or the asking body to like really take us down this road.
Okay, we can always continue the conversation on the floor, right?
That's true.
Yeah, and then we can talk about more detailedly what you have found and what your concern is.
Okay, and if I'm wrong, so what I'll do is I'm not going to vote in favor. I'm going to do my work, and if I change my mind, I'll vote in favor when it comes to the
Okay,
floor.
excellent.
Okay? How's that? All right, perfect. Thank you.
So are you ready to take a vote on SB 77? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We have one, we have two. Okay, so that's 3-2. Okay, thank you very much. We have one more minute. Oh, do you want to take it? Who wants
I'll
take it
agree to
out?
take it out, Madam Chair.
Okay, fine, you can take it out.
And Madam Chair, I move we come out of executive session.
I'll second that.
Okay, we're out of executive session. Okay, one more minute. 50 minutes each. So the time is right here, so 9:15 is the other one.
Yeah, we used it twice. Once was a rain that happened in class.
Okay, we have 9:15. We'll continue with Senate Bill 93. And we have Mr. Grant Bossy introducing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I remain Grant Bossy, Deputy Chief of Staff for the New Hampshire Senate, and with your indulgence, here representing Senator Kevin Avard, the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 93, who appreciates the courtesy. This bill was a request of a former colleague of Senator Avard's who was approached by a special education coordinator looking for solutions. The use of charter schools was expanded last session, and as we know, no matter how hard we try, there's always something that you're not specific enough in writing the legislation. This year, Senator Avard is here to ask the legislature to fix a system for special education relating to charter schools, individual education plans, and the funding meant to cover them. Currently, charter school accepts a student and the funding meant to educate them, but if there's an IEP and special considerations for the student, the law seems to have left the public school district school the funding and coordination of the student's special needs. When the student is no longer attending that district school, in order to implement the IEP, the local school is required to hire additional personnel, travel to the charter school to deliver those services. This results in spending more time and funding on coordination than actually teaching. For the charter school, it eliminates to a great extent the ability to incorporate the IEP into the everyday learning experience. The current method of a new teacher coming to the school just for one student also singles out those who need special education services, can lead to teasing and bullying, and it's a problem that the local officials have brought up to Senator Avard's attention. Senator Avard wants to create a discussion on why funding, including special education funding, should follow the child to that public charter school. This bill attempts to have the public school and the public charter school work together so the funds will benefit the child as was meant to be done. District schools are not holding the money for control. Charter schools are not shirking their duty to provide a full education. The legislature needs to make it clear that any federal money received by the state for special education should be passed on to the public charter school now educating the child. These are public schools in New Hampshire's public school system. Senator Avard asks you to consider the children and pass this bill to the House for where more consideration and participation will take place. He asks you to hopefully join him at the governor signs Senate Bill 93 into law this spring, once again proving that kids come first and politics last. I will defer any questions as I do not know as much about this bill as Senator Avard.
I'm sorry, I messed up your last name. I couldn't quite figure out what it. Borg, B-O-R-G-E. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. So I apologize that I'm not able to provide print copies of my testimony because with the storm, I ran out of ink and couldn't go get you more. So I did email it to everyone last night. I would like to speak in favor of this bill. As mentioned by the previous speaker, we have a system in which parents are afforded a choice of their schools for public school options. The current system it has flaws. And so the bill that's before you is really an excellent step in trying to repair some of those flaws. As we are right now, state and federal definitions are lengthy, but very clear that the purpose of special education services is to address the unique needs of a child with a disability and to ensure access of this child to the general education curriculum so that the child can meet educational standards within the jurisdiction of that public entity. In New Hampshire, when a child attends a chartered public school, the district where the child lives retains responsibility for special education, but the charter school retains responsibility for the general education component. So when you're trying to create a system by which you're providing services that are reasonably calculated to align to something that you don't have responsibility or jurisdiction over, it's simply not sustainable. So that in and of itself creates flaws and difficulty for the child who's sitting in the middle. This disconnect also sits at the root of much of the discord and the difficulty in our charter school, public school, neighborhood school relationship. Unfortunately, this system has promoted very much a yours versus ours kind of a situation, whereas we've worked very hard in our neighborhood schools that all of our students who are there are our students. Any exceptionalities that might exist are simply that. The system right now promotes, this is yours, you take care of that, and this is mine, and I'll take care of this. It doesn't really promote that genuine integration of services and intent and spirit for which our educational system is really designed. If I offer some examples, these are real life examples that have been experienced by districts in the South Central region, because we talk often, our stories are shared, they are consistent among districts, unfortunately. So for example, things that have genuinely truly occurred, charter schools have refused to implement accommodations and or modifications that are implemented in IEP because that's not a general ed responsibility. Minimal efforts to support generalization of skills into the general education classroom. And so when I talk about that, I'm thinking about at its simplest, your student who receives speech and language services. And in that consultation between the speech pathologist and the classroom teacher, the teacher would then prompt for skills that we know the child has learned, right? So let's think super simple. If I have a child who is learning to correctly articulate the R sound, which is notoriously difficult and very late developing. So if we know that that child can produce it in the therapy session, the next step is to produce it in connected speech wherever you go. So if the teacher has knowledge that this has been taught, the child can master it in a separate setting. When that child mispronounces in the classroom, the teacher will just prompt with a cue that's been taught by the speech pathologist. So those are things that have been refused, and that's very unfortunate. Efforts to defer enrollment of students with suspected or existing disabilities until specific resources are allocated by a school district. And this is most commonly paraprofessionals. I have lived this one myself. A family being guided that really you shouldn't register with us yet. Go back to your school district, register with your school district, get that IEP and have a paraprofessional in it. So then when you come to us, there's extra staff that comes with it. And that is very unfortunate. And that is not how our system is intended to operate. And then also insistence that school districts pay invoices for classroom teacher interactions with students who have disabilities. And that one is a little bit heartbreaking. A general education teacher is a teacher to all students. If they have exceptionalities, those are separate. Those are exceptionalities. We embrace those. They contribute to our culture and our climate, and they make it more valuable. That crushes my soul a little bit. Each of these examples that I give to you are examples of standard expectations for general education in our neighborhood schools. But it's the system right now creates a situation in which it doesn't seem to be a standard expectation in our charter schools. And that's not, again, how our system is designed or the spirit of it. It's not how we are really wanting to interact with our students. So in short, our system is flawed and has resulted in conditions contrary to the best interests of our students. SB 93 is an exciting step toward aligning service delivery for our students with educational disabilities with their general ed counterparts. I do have a couple of suggested revisions for your consideration. In Section B, Part 1, revising the language such that the charter public school initiates the IEP team meeting when a student with an IEP is enrolled by his or her parent. This is really small and logistical, simply because when a student does enroll in a new school, and I'll give the example of if a student leaves my district and enrolls in, let's say, the neighboring district of Nashua, I no longer have access to their records to be able to establish a meeting. The next school does. So it just makes more sense that that next school would start the meeting and invite the sending school. So logistically, that just makes it simpler. My other suggestion, again, for your consideration in Part 1, again, in Section C, simply designating the charter public school as the local education agency responsible for special education would open access for direct allocation of all of those costs. It would eliminate that middleman of the school district. It would be more simplified, whereby the charter school wouldn't need to manage funding streams from multiple districts because they do receive students from a number of districts. I couldn't even tell you the number that each charter school receives just students from. It would make it much more single stream as opposed to multiple stream. So as mentioned, it creates a genuine opportunity to repair the flaws that are in our system. And if I can be of any further assistance, I did provide all of my contact information in the email letter that I sent to you last night.
Thank you very much. Questions
very
from the members? Senator Pepper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. On page 2, line 10, it says the chartered school will provide all related services, including financially, while a child is a full student of the chartered public school. Is there a chance where the child is not a full-time student, but perhaps maybe
It's certainly
part-time?
possible. So for example, VLAX is our virtual charter school in New Hampshire. We have a number of students who will try a class first. At the high school level in particular, if there's a course that they're very interested in but isn't offered in their local public school, well, I can access Latin on VLAX, and maybe my high school doesn't offer that. So that would be a part-time student.
Follow up.
So if it's a part-time student, this says full student line 10, would the costs be split that way or between the chartered public school and the public school?
So in that example of the high school student who wants to take a language class that's not offered, any special education services would therefore presumably be already happening in their regular school day while they're in their regular public school, their neighborhood school. So there wouldn't necessarily need for cost. Really, I would see potentially accommodations might be applicable. Accommodations are generally environmental. So it might be I need extra time. It might need I need copies of a classroom teacher's notes, or maybe I need guided notes so that I can filter out from all of this content where I'm supposed to concentrate. Those are things really don't have a cost associated with them unless you really like disaggregate teacher time.
What's that? Any other questions? Okay, I have a question. A child is now going to charter school and has an IEP coming from the descending school. So the descending school and the charter school will get together and discuss the IEP.
Mm-hmm.
And how far in advance? In the beginning of the school year, 2 weeks before,
Okay,
so
so
that they have an idea what's going on.
if the student is already enrolled, that happens on an annual basis and a routine basis. When students enroll new, so it's a new enrollment in a charter school, we work to coordinate that really as quickly as we can. It depends on when we get notice that the child has been enrolled. In the summertime, it becomes a little bit tricky because not everybody works in the summertime. I have the luxury of a staff person who can be available in the summertime. Not every district does, and not every charter school has staff who's available in the summertime. So we may be looking at those first couple of weeks of September. When you have a student who enrolls mid-year, you work to collaborate that as quickly as possible. Under special education rules, when you're talking about an IEP team meeting, you do need to provide 10 days notice to the family unless they agree to waive that.
Because we had a bill last session, and I think it failed because the charter school wanted to meet at least 2 weeks before, so they have an opportunity to plan
Yep.
for this child's education.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're talking about having it happen sometime during the first couple of weeks.
Right. And that really comes about through logistics, and that often staff are not present to be able to coordinate that meeting. And that works on both sides. So we have been able to coordinate meetings in the summertime with charter schools, but others where they simply are not present and not working yet. So you can't coordinate that until people are back to work.
So that would be a very limited basis. You have the ability to do that, but not all schools do.
Right. My district does. Not every school district does.
Okay.
Yep. And not every charter school does. It really just depends on your structure.
So if the charter school doesn't really know that this child has an IEP or is aware of it, but not knowing what the plan is a couple of weeks in the beginning of the school year sort of setting this child back?
I would say that it's really no different than when a child changes public school, neighborhood school districts, because often parents will not include information about the existence of an IEP, and we don't always know until the records arrive from the sending school. So those couple of weeks, while not desirable, it happens routinely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Great. You're very welcome.
Anybody from the audience wants to chime in? Please. Chime.
Good morning. My name is Jane Bergeron Beaulieu, and I'm the Executive Director for the New Hampshire Association of Special Education Administrators. I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 93. am representing special education leaders from across the state. We have over 280 members of special education leaders from around the state as well as from private special education schools. And our association, as I mentioned, is in support of this bill. I also submitted my testimony to you electronically. So as you've heard, the committee knows that charter schools play an important role in the part of the education of New Hampshire's children and youth, especially those with individual education plans, which we call IEPs. For years, local school districts and public charter schools have struggled with the challenges related to providing services to students with IEPs, and one of the biggest issues tends to center around who pays for the services that are identified in the IEP. And Senate Bill 93 is a giant step in terms of trying to resolve that challenge. Incorporated into the bill, we have some suggestions around some potential language changes. Incorporated into the bill should be language that makes the charter school the LEA, which is the local educational agency for IDEA purposes. And this would allow federal IDEA monies to flow directly to the charter school rather than the school district. This would be used to support and implement students' IEPs while they're attending the charter schools, and the IDEA monies would not go to the local district. They would flow directly to the charter school for funding a free and appropriate education for those students with IEPs. It would mean conducting the IEP meetings, writing the IEPs, and working directly with families. As you heard from Rachel, the system is very fragmented at this point. This would give them the opportunity to take full control of the IEPs as well as the IDEA monies that go with those students. So as in summary, we're in support of the bill, and I have included in the testimony some additional language from Attorney Gerald Zellin, who works very closely with our association in terms of some of the technical language that he might suggest be considered for the bill. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from the committee members? None? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else who wants to speak on this? Please come forward, state your name.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Fredette. I'm the State Director of Special Education at the Department of Education. I came really for just some technical issues with the bill. I do have to say that many of the things that Rachel and Jane shared with you are in fact things that are going on. We hear it on a regular basis, and this solution is a step towards fixing many of those difficulties. The issue really is that the charter school is not an LEA, and so with the way this bill is written, we would not be able to pass federal funds through the school district to the charter school. You would need to make the charter school its own LEA in order for us to give them federal funds. Also with this, the way it is written, public schools, regular public schools, would still be responsible for the provision of special education, which means that if a charter school made a decision that violated IDEA or was against the IEP, the complaint would still fall to the school district rather than the charter school. So they would have no decision on what was going to happen in the charter school. They would have no decision on how the monies that they have are going to be spent. And then they would still have a complaint filed against them because they are still considered the LEA of responsibility. So those are some technical difficulties with the bill. It would definitely solve many issues, though, I have to say. Those are really the only things that I had brought up. It was the funding. And then I'm not sure that the funding they receive from the state money and the IDEA funds would be enough for the charter school to provide those provisions in all of the IEPs that are presented. It's not. I mean, it's money, but it's not a lot of money. So that would be another consideration that we wanted to share.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a very interesting point that you brought up, that the federal money is not available directly to the charter schools.
Right, because it's not its own, it's not considered an LEA for special
Okay,
education.
so something needs to be done.
Yeah.
And how do you propose it?
If you made them their own, you could make them their own LEA, but I would go back to consideration of the funding that the charter schools receive to provide the special education.
Any other questions from the members? None. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Senator Clegg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, member of the committee. For the record, my name is Robert Clegg. I will do anything that is necessary to help craft the necessary changes in the bill as they go. I am the one that crafted the beginning, so as you know, most of you know, it's one of my specialties. So I'd be more than happy to assist.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody else would like to speak? Attorney Fenton, do you have anything to add or anything that you? Not on this topic. Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Just for clarification, I think this is for Rebecca. I thought that I caught in the beginning of your testimony that this would categorize charter schools as LEAs?
Yes, it would.
Okay. So with that,
This bill will not.
will not,
Will not.
it doesn't, okay.
It will not.
Can she come back up? Okay.
Sure.
Because that was, I wrote that down, and then in the end, you said we have to make them LEAs so this federal funds can flow. So how do we
Right.
do that?
So the way this is written, it would not make them the LEA that for special education. It would still be the responsibility of the resident district.
Okay.
And so it would be the same situation we are in now, except the charter school would be making all of the decisions.
Okay. Is this may I follow up?
Follow up?
Is this the vehicle for that?
It could be, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Any further questions? Anybody else in the audience who likes to add something to this? Are you all set?
I'm all set with the audience, but I wanted to talk to you. Do we do it in executive session or now? It just has to do with the timing on what you brought up about the bill from last year was, I agree with you about the timing of when this all goes into place so that they have enough of a transition
We're
window.
not going to have an executive session on this one right now.
Okay.
Because I think we have something that needs to be done, so it's
Okay,
be
so
fixed. So we'll just hold off,
All right, perfect.
okay?
You brought up thank you, Senator.
Okay. Any other comments from the audience? Seeing none, thank you very much. This concludes the testimony on HB 93. And we'll follow up with Senate Bill 109. And Senator Lang will introduce it.
Thank you,
Senator Lang,
Madam
go ahead.
Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for taking my testimony. Senate Bill 109, relative to school safety and coordination of law enforcement. This is a clarification bill. It was a bill that was brought at the request of a school superintendent due to real-world issues that occurred within the district. As you may or may not know, when superintendents and school boards are dealing with suspensions or expulsions, those are matters that go into a non-public session. So if the school board's considering an expulsion, they will enter into a non-public session because it's a student matter, and they will discuss the expulsion. And then they'll announce the results at the end, but the conversation occurs in a non-public session. The reason this was brought forward was there was an incident in a school where the superintendent brought it to law enforcement's acknowledgement. They investigated. They ended up charging the student. The school board went to take disciplinary action. The problem was law enforcement was concerned that they couldn't talk about the matter because it was in juvenile court, and there was a conflict between the juvenile court privacy rights and what the school needed to know in order to keep the students safe. And so this bill makes it clear that law enforcement can speak to a school board when it comes to safety matters concerning the students. That's the crux of the whole thing again. So it goes back to the make sure there's no conflict in the law relative to the students' right to privacy in a court case and the need for the school system to be able to keep their students safe. So it allows law enforcement to come in that non-public disciplinary action setting and say what happened so the schools can take the appropriate actions. It's that simple. Happy to answer questions, but we have Superintendent Ronna. Actually, she got married. I forgot her last name. She was my principal when I was on the school board. But she's here to speak to it. And there's a trooper here as well that if we need, we can probably answer some questions as well.
Okay. So we don't need ask any questions of you, is that it?
Excellent.
Thank you very much, Senator Lang. Okay, who's the next one? It's, you are Rena.
Right. Rana Hasbrook.
Okay.
Thank you. So I will bring a bit of clarity and specificity to the testimony of Senator Lang. The end of last school year, we had an incident with a student, student safety of the entire student body, but particularly centered around a student. It came forward for this fall for an expulsion hearing. I'm going to speak with the specificity of the North Country towns. We do not, most of us do not have SROs. Some of us do not have local police departments. So we work hand in hand and rely heavily upon the state police department. We had to act with immediacy with this threat and did so. Luckily, it was the second to the last day of school. But when it came time to have a potential expulsion hearing, it was an expulsion hearing with the family, we only had information directly from the family, knew that that information was not accurate. So I want to read some more specificity for what actually happened. We were holding a disciplinary hearing with the school board, and we were seeking to expel a student following a credible school shooting threat. Law enforcement had responded, and it was our understanding that the student had been adjudicated in juvenile court. However, when it came time for the hearing, law enforcement was willing to testify. Lieutenant Cody is here today to attest to that. Wanted to, but their attorney told them they couldn't because of RSA 169-C. The assistant attorney general believed that there was nothing in the statutes that would permit ongoing communication between law enforcement and the schools in these scenarios, even where a school is joined in the juvenile adjudication and had been the primary reporters of said incident. In this particular hearing, the parents of the students made believed misstatements about the criminal investigation, advocating for their child. We had no ability to refute those statements. So the state school zone legislation cannot stop our report to law enforcement. There are two parts to safety, and that is my role and the gravity of it on a routine basis. And that is the community at large, for which law enforcement is responsible, and I am responsible as a superintendent, and the safety of the schools, for which the district is also responsible. That partnership is vital. The experience of a juvenile prosecutor also shared with me that those charged with serious crimes, the juveniles certified as adults for trial, and those too young to face certification for major crimes, as well as work with the school, it's understood that there's a need for a stronger collaborative approach. We need that information to make informed decisions, as well as our school boards. So when a district is seeking to protect their student community by moving to exclude a student who has threatened school safety, particularly in school shootings, for example, the law should not prohibit law enforcement from supporting the school's efforts and at least providing valid and accurate information for the districts to make the most informed decision they can regarding the safety of the student body as a whole, as well as for that individual child. We are not asking to know things that happened outside of school, but directly pertaining to school where we're the reporters. We definitely need that reciprocity to make the most informed decisions in the best interest and safety of all concerned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the committee members? None, thank you. The next speaker is Lieutenant Michael Coate. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Michael Cody. I'm a lieutenant with the state police, and I'm also the troop commander for Troop F, which is Cowas in Grafton County. As you guys know, the dynamics of our state, the state police is the primary police service for a lot of municipalities in Cowas and Grafton counties. with school safety threats and everything else, obviously, the Department of Safety, the state police has tried to move forward like everything else to ensure that our most vulnerable population is safe and safe to learn and give a good environment for our children to learn. As of last year, it became apparent through a school shooting threat that the state police responded to. They took immediate action and brought the child through the juvenile court system. It became apparent afterwards, obviously there's one side of it, which is what we do, which is to separate the threat from the population. But the secondary part was that we were quickly advised by legal that we couldn't share documents. So it's great that the school can call us and ask us for help, but in return, we can't keep that student body safe by sharing the information that's needed to make an educated decision on a more long-term approach on separating the child so they can get the help, because that's what the juvenile system is about, right? It's about getting help and everything else. And that doesn't happen overnight. That takes time. So obviously there has to be a secondary portion of that, which is this falls upon the school, which we support. So I'm here to give verbal testimony this morning in support of this bill as a troop commander for an area that supports a lot of small schools. And my hands are tied with, kind of keeping our students safe with solely the sharing of information in which we know there's confidentiality within their own ranks. So that's all I have, but I'd gladly take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members?
Yes, thank you. All of this would be done in a non-public setting though, correct? Okay. All right. Thank you. Would,
The school board sessions. Talk loud. The school boards go into a non-public session, and I think the SAU could talk more about that. But because again, when it came time for us to share documents, we were told we couldn't, so we offered verbal testimony into the investigation, which again was disturbing, and we were not able to properly state the facts so those folks could make an educated decision based on the rest of the student body.
okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Beth Margison. I am the General Counsel and Legislative Liaison for DCYF, and I'm here to speak on the bill, and I thank you for your time this morning. We are not, for or against this bill. We just wanted to raise some concerns and just some issues with the legislation. When it's a delinquency matter, that is 169B, that is not 169C. 169C is actually the child abuse and neglect statute. The other issue is 170G8A, which is a records release statute, which allows the division to share information with law enforcement for purposes of child abuse and neglect investigations. If this legislation were to go forward, there would need to be a change in there. So to say that for school safety or exigent circumstances, the division could share information. And the last, the last issue that we were just wondering about, juveniles are obviously entitled to confidentiality. We also recognize the need to keep people safe. So that is something that division is very much aware of. But also the need is for juveniles to have confidentiality. We don't know what happened. It was in the the Attorney General's office. It didn't come to DCYF, so we don't know exactly what happened with this particular student. We don't know if actually, even without this information, he was able to be expelled. So that would be a question that we have. So thank you very much, Madam Chair and members, for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan. I'm from Stratford County District 10, which is now just the towns of Durham. My district keeps getting smaller every 10 years. It's the home of we recently built the Oyster River Cooperative School District, which we share with Lead Madbury. Recently built a new Oyster River Middle School for, I think, about $40 million, which was designed with the ground up with a lot of security features in mind and a lot of other considerations. We certainly did spend more than the bare minimum, and some people outside the committee criticized for that. But anyway, school security has been on the minds of people, especially people in my community, because we just built that high school. And if somebody, whether a student or not, well, especially if the non-student gets in there with a gun, there's not much we can do about it unless we just have to lock down the school, and hopefully they'll go away till they actually start shooting or actually threatening people. And that's of course, I wrote my testimony before I heard Reverend Lang's testimony and the others, and certainly it was excellent. I agree 100% with everything that was said, and certainly I will happily vote for the bill as is if and when it makes it over to my side of the wall in the House. But there's perhaps a slightly larger issue than just the narrow issue of 196C, and that was probably I'm going to guess that was probably why the bill probably was narrowly crafted, just to deal with the 196C issue, and not to address other threats such as, well, even students over 18 or people from outside the school threatening the students. So I happen to be a co-sponsor of a bill which you may or may not see eventually, HB 78, and that overturns another bill, HB 1178, which forbade state or local government from enforcing federal firearms law. And although I didn't make it on the co-sponsor list, I'm also a strong supporter of HB 32, which is going to create a state version of the Safe Schools Act, which doesn't exist at the moment. But certainly this is a good bill as is, or could be made even better if you amend it to further empower schools to take action to prevent a crisis. And there's I mentioned 2 omissions in my written testimony, and I'm glad those things were omitted. Firstly, the schools can coordinate with any law enforcement issue, not just New Hampshire officials. That theoretically, and maybe I shouldn't say this, that does theoretically mean in some cases they could be working with federal law enforcement officials to enforce those federal laws, such as the Safe Schools Act. And also many, especially in the Connecticut River Valley, where I lived for about 10 years, many of the schools in that part of the state, probably most of them, have students from the other side of the river in Vermont. So if you have a student or another person in Vermont who's threatening the students, you'll be able to reach out to the law enforcement in that community to work on it. So that's, which is something that maybe school districts, if this law isn't passed, might feel constrained from doing. And also, there's no carve out for firearms or any other specific type of weapons. So you can prevent any threat, even those involving firearms. In fact, school shootings, and rightly so, were specifically mentioned, even though the incident that prompted this involved a underage student. So the so-called Second Amendment issues probably don't apply quite as strongly to that individual than if it had been, a older student over 18 or somebody from outside the community doing it. But certainly, as was mentioned several times in the testimony, school shootings are one of the biggest, probably the biggest threat we're worried about. A third omission, in my written testimony, I mentioned a third omission, which is talks about protecting students. But every school, there's a lot of adults who are part of the school community. So you could also have a threat to the faculty, the administration, a coach, or and also even with student age people in the schools, there's often students from other schools for one reason or another present in a school, athletic competitions, special classes, etc. So it should really, I think that would probably not be a complicated change, which would be to just say anybody in the school, not just the students. So it's just certainly the school shootings, I think even resources officers have been killed. Certainly many teachers, many coaches, many paraprofessionals, and they all deserve to be protected. That's something I didn't really think of something I really didn't think of when I was writing my written testimony last night, which Senator Lang and the others reminded me of, that this is just, the wording is narrowly about children and children in need of protection under 196C, and that that would probably be a more controversial change, but that's something to consider, is making it broader, so just allowing ongoing communication between law enforcement and school employees, in any context where they learn of a threat, not just if it involves a student covered under 196C. And that's probably going to be a more controversial change, but it's something to consider. So I thank the senator for introducing the bill, and I thank everybody who testified. So it's been enlightening, and I certainly look forward to seeing it on the other side of the wall, after crossover. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to come back. If this legislation does involve 169C, that would be problematic. Again, without knowing exactly how it would be crafted, 169C, we believe, does not, the federal law would not allow us to share information from 169C cases. So that, again, without knowing the particulars of how it would actually be drafted and whether or not it was meant to be 169B as opposed to 169C, we just want to make the committee aware of that.
Thank you. Are you saying that 169C does not belong here?
From what I understood from Senator Lang's testimony, the individual involved with this was involved with a delinquency proceeding. So that would be 169B. The last speaker talked about 169C. I assume that 169C was just an error. But if 169C is involved, it would likely not be allowed under federal law for us to share information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Attorney Fenton, can you respond to that? 169B versus 169C?
Good morning. For the record, Diana Fenton, an attorney with the Department of Education. I'm not nearly as familiar with 169B and C as Beth is, and I will defer to her expertise. But I think that the issue that has been identified, we can all agree is critically important. So I think the practical approach is to have the superintendent, myself, and Beth work to craft an amendment that will address the concerns that were brought up. I would also request that you look into whether or not the federal regs would allow for the dissemination of that information. I think it's the federal regs are really easy to fall back on and say they won't allow that, but I think we have to dig a little deeper on that because this issue is critically important for our state and for allowing the superintendent to have that information to make a well-informed decision. And I think that's something we can all agree on in terms of the concept of this bill. I have been before you when we've had other issues come up with amendments, and we've been successful in overcoming those hurdles, and I think we can be successful in this instance as well. So if you give us some time to work with our partners, I think we can come back with a workable amendment, if the committee is amenable to that.
Yes, you can have the time.
Perfect.
Because I think this is something that we need to work on. It's
Absolutely. I don't think
make it
there's
as-
any disagreement
Right.
to that. So,
Senator Lang, are you willing to work with them?
Absolutely. I'll sponsor the amendment
Okay,
when we get the right chapter
okay, very good.
worked out.
thank you. We appreciate your sponsorship.
Any other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. That
Thank
will
you. I
help us
appreciate the
to
opportunity.
do it right.
Thank you.
So, thanks. Anybody else who has anything to say on this bill? If not, this concludes the hearing, the Senate Education hearing. Thank you all for coming.
Lieutenant Cody.
Do you want these or can I take them?
You can take them. I've written down the numbers.
No, Why when I was in the house, I was I have already had, so I have to walk up and down. Well, it doesn't help that, you know, two of my food groups are caffeine and sugar. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. It's always interesting when